Welcome on into the playoff edition of the BKL Makes Me Want to Shout show. The Bills gearing up for a big game down in Jacksonville this weekend against Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. I'm Josh Reed alongside Carl Jones, Matt Perino, and Ryan Talbot. Fellas, we started this show all the way back at the beginning of the season, and consistently the thought was, it's not about making the playoffs. Eventually, they're going to find their way into it. I don't think any of us were ever worried about that. The way they got here was interesting, kind of the road less traveled for them because they're going to start the playoffs on the road. Matt, when you look at how they got here and where they are right now, how do you feel about the Bills as the playoffs get ready to get underway?
I mean, I feel really good about them. The one thing that kind of sits at the back of your mind when you're analyzing this team is just the simple fact that they're going to have to go on the road for the duration of the playoffs unless the Chargers somehow go on a roll to the AFC title game, which I don't think anybody really thinks is very possible and happening. And, could the Bills win on the road? Sure. They've lost some bad ones this year. They've also never won a road playoff game under Sean McDermott. So there are things working against them, but this is kind of a weird year. Like, if you think about how we're going into this playoffs, the other big overarching thought is no Chiefs, no Ravens, no Bengals. Like, all the big time contenders going into the year are out. And oh, by the way, the Bills beat all those teams and are a big reason why they're out. And so I don't know. I almost feel like this is a seasoned group that very seasoned in some areas. I mean, the Jordan Poyer story is phenomenal. Jordan Phillips came back last week. There's a lot of old Bills, Tre'Davious White, that are having a really good season. And you have Josh Allen. And to me, that's like the biggest part going into this, is that I feel the best about the Bills because of who plays quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh Allen, the reigning MVP, gives you a shot against anyone in this league. And Jacksonville's as hot as any team in the NFL right now, 8-game win streak. The offense looks amazing. But at the end of the day, with Josh Allen, this team can beat everyone. But my biggest question is, what Buffalo Bills team is going to show up? We've seen this team beat some of the best opponents on their schedule this year. As Matt alluded to, Kansas City taking out the Ravens in week 1. But we've also seen them drop games to Atlanta and an ugly game to Miami. It all comes down to which Bills team shows up on Sunday. If the Bills team that has all this confidence, has all this experience in the playoffs shows up, there's no doubt in my mind that they can win this matchup.
Heading into this game, I think two things are very pronounced: their flaws as well as their strengths. And I think when you think about the things that led them here, they have the MVP at quarterback. They have an outstanding running game led by James Cook and then the 5 guys up front. And their secondary has been playing really well of late. I know the Bengals game was a wart, but outside of that, I think about that second half in New England. But then on the other side, the flaws are glaring. The wide receivers, we know who they are at this point. I know Brandon Cooks flashed a little bit in the second to last game of the season, but outside of him, we don't know what you're going to get week to week. And then we know what the run defense is at this point. It's not great. So I'm interested to see in the postseason which side wins out. Are the strengths that strong where they're able to rattle off 4 wins to raise the Lombardi Trophy? Or are the flaws that strong as well on the other side of that to where they can't accomplish anything because Travis Etienne is running for 250 yards or whatever?
It took us about 30 seconds into this show to get immediately to the storyline of they've got the MVP in Josh Allen and the other star quarterbacks aren't in the AFC right now. Ryan, the narrative nationally right now in particular is that the pressure is on Josh Allen right now to get it done this year, in particular because those quarterbacks aren't in it. Now, the flip side of it, people will argue they're going to face some amazing defenses to try to get to the Super Bowl. Where do you stand on that narrative and that discussion?
I mean, in terms of pressure, yeah, there's always pressure on Josh Allen when he's in the playoffs, and it doesn't matter who the opposition is. I know there's no Kansas City, no Bengals with Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson with the Ravens, but those teams are out because they have their own flaws. The teams that are in the playoffs in the AFC this year have some great defenses. There's some star players on both sides of the ball. I think it's unfair, the national narrative that's going on around Josh Allen right now, right or wrong, because he is the reigning MVP. The Bills are a wild card team. They didn't run away with their division. This isn't a team that's looked like a powerhouse all year. I just feel like it's almost a little bit unfair to Allen because, as we pointed out in that first segment, the wide receivers on this team, not very good. It's been Josh Allen and James Cook on offense, and it's been a patchwork a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. I feel like this is by far his worst roster in terms of the playoff teams that the Bills have had. So, I get the national narrative. I just don't think it's very fair.
Carl, typically when the pressure's at its highest, that's when we see the best Josh Allen. And I think we will see the best Josh Allen. And quite frankly, he needs to do that. I kind of like the idea that the pressure's on him. I want to see him go out there and have some Kobe Bryant type moments.
I feel like you've been reading my text messages lately, so I need to hit up AT&T and see how you've been hacking my phone, because I'm right with you. I think of the best quarterbacks of my lifetime, whether that is a Mahomes, a Brady, a Manning, and Aaron Rodgers, and they all have moments in situations like this where the cards are stacked against them. How do they dig way out of it? I remember 3 years ago when Patrick Mahomes in the postseason had Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, McCole Hardman, and I think my man, the Skylar Moore at wide receiver. How is Patrick Mahomes going to do it? Then he rattled off 3 straight games on the road, and then he wins Super Bowl MVP. I think about Tom Brady with Chris Hogan, the lacrosse player, winning a Super Bowl. And I'm not sitting up here and saying if Josh Allen doesn't accomplish it, it makes him a less than of a player. But what it is for me, it's exciting the fact that he has an opportunity to put himself in those conversations to where he can say, listen, this team isn't the best team of my era, but I've been able to lift them in a situation to where they've never been before. So it's exciting for me. I understand the narrative, and I'm not here to partake in that. But the fact that he has the opportunity in front of him to do this is super exciting.
And Matt, a little bit to Carl's point there, the other star quarterbacks may not be there. They're going up against these good defenses. We've talked about it all year long. If he can get it done with these weapons, I think that's the feather in the cap.
Yeah, and I don't think the national narrative is what it is. But when you go back to look at the resume of Josh Allen, there's no quarterback in the Patrick Mahomes era that has a better resume than Josh Allen. So it's hard for me to get all the way to, if he doesn't bring this specific group. I mean, guys, has Brandon Beane his seat ever been warmer than it is right now? I've never felt that there was a collective from the fan base and from the national media folks that are really asking, is this a good enough roster around Josh Allen? That question's being asked. So I think that if anything, that dulls the pressure a little bit around Josh Allen. But I think internally with what he wants to accomplish, where I think that he wants to be in terms of a Super Bowl champion and mentioned in the same breath with some of those guys that you mentioned earlier. I mean, the John Elways of the world. Elway, he was the Josh Allen of his era, right? Like banging at the door and not going well. People asking the same questions. Is it ever going to happen to him? Same thing for Peyton Manning. And eventually the great ones figure out a way to do it. And I think the Kobe Bryant comparison is so interesting because, like, I remember early in his career, and I think, Josh, you've been a little bit critical of Josh for this. It's like, it's one thing to talk about the Mamba mentality. It's another thing to be about the Mamba mentality. Well, we're going to get a chance to see if Josh Allen can go into Mamba mode, because they're going to need that version of him on the road in the playoffs for 3 straight rounds, likely to get to Santa Clara. That, to me, is the version of the player that you're going to need. And honestly, that's the version of the player that we've seen in the playoffs year in and year out since the last time they went to Houston in 2019 on the road in the playoffs.
You mentioned Brandon Beane, the hot seat. Sean McDermott's kind of been on and off the hot seat in many fans' eyes. We're going to discuss that coming up a little bit later on the show. But right now, we got to take a break. Stick around. BKL Makes Me Want to Shout's going to be right back. Welcome on back to the BKL Makes Me Want to Shout show. We continue to get you ready for the Bills and Jags wildcard game coming up this weekend. Matt, when you look at the weapons on both sides, both sidelines going into this game, who is the number one weapon, whether it's Bills or Jags?
Man, there's a host of them over on the Jacksonville sideline. I mean, you think about Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, Travis Etienne. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is surrounded by talent on that offense. But for me, give me James Cook. I think James Cook is the most important player, singular offensive player in this game. And I put him even above the quarterbacks because I think, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Trevor Lawrence is playing really good football. He has been on the kind of heater going into the playoffs that is rightfully making some Bills fans a little bit anxious about this matchup. But you want to talk about a guy that's been on a heater. It's been James Cook, the NFL's rushing champion, who can go on the road. Like when you hear about old-time general managers, NFL coaches talk about the game, what they constantly kind of go back to is that really good road games travel in December, in January, and run games, And I think the Bills have one of the best in the league. And I think that's where you have to win in this game. And it's more than just about the run game. To me, it's about how do you make sure James Cook is on the field. I know you like getting Ty Johnson involved in the game. I know he's your third down back. I get all of that. But you could have Ty Johnson on the field and James Cook on the field at the same time, and I think he needs to get touches in this game. He needs to get snaps in this game. And if you're going to go out in this playoffs, it better be with your best player on the field.
For me, it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, and James Cook was going to be my answer, but Perino, once again, is reading my notes in my AT&T. So I got beef with everyone on the show right now, except for Ryan. Shout out to Ryan.
That's why we make you go second and third. We want to jump the gun on you a little bit.
AT&T, come holler at me because they clearly hacking my phone. But for me, it's Trevor, and I had the privilege of playing him twice in college. And I remember the scouting report heading into that week was, listen, he can make all the throws. There isn't a blade of grass that he can't touch. He can throw it 60 yards. He can throw it on the run. But what's the thing that you don't really grasp until you're out there with him is that, he may be 6'6" and lanky, but he can scoot a little bit too. And I think that his ability or the Bills' ability on defense to limit those plays on the ground, there are only going to be about 4 or 5 examples. But those 4 or 5 plays where he has the ability to escape the pocket, where he can make a 5-yard gain and turn into 15, the Bills will have to make sure they're locked into that, making sure that they are limiting him in that manner, similar to how they play Drake May. Drake May can scoot a little bit as well, but the Bills have done a good job of corralling him and keeping him in the pocket. Trevor can hit every blade of grass, and I remember that vividly, but then there were a couple times where he kind of went in the booth and said, I'm going to run a little bit. So if you are those linebackers and the safeties.
How did the view look from behind?
Listen.
When you're like, oh, there you go.
Listen.
How fast did he get by you?
He's a tall guy. I'm going to just say that. I looked at a lot of Lawrence numbers on the back plates when he's running. But I think if you're at the Bills defense, yes, his arm is great, but you make sure he's a pure pocket passer on Sunday.
Ryan, number 1 weapon on the field Sunday.
Yeah, it's James Cook. I'm going to go along with what Matt said, and this is going to be his toughest task of the year because this Jacksonville run defense is legit. No running back has rushed for more than 75 yards against this team this year, and the Bills are going to need James Cook to eclipse that total. And it's not just going to be on the ground. They need to get him involved in the pass game, get him out on some swinging passes, let him run some routes because that can be a mismatch that you can exploit against this Jacksonville team. So it's not just on the ground. They need James Cook to step up and have a huge game for them also as a receiver.
Yeah, I think that we should point out that none of us are taking Josh Allen because I think we all assume that he is the number 1 weapon in all of the playoffs, not even just going into this game. My number 1 weapon going into this game, I'm actually going to take a little twist on this. I'm going to say it's Joey Bosa. I'm going to go on the other side of the ball. I think Joey Bosa showed flashes, in particular early in the year, of what he can still do. He was able to get a little refreshed, right? He didn't play in this last game. You'd like to think that they've given him some time off to just kind of recover a little bit, throttle him back, get him ready, because when they signed him this offseason, it was for the idea that, look, when we get to the postseason, we need you to be the guy that makes the big play in the big moment to win the big game. So I think Joey Bosa is my guy. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit now. Matt, what's the Bills' biggest advantage against the Jags?
That's a great question.
That's why I asked it. I mean, what are we doing here?
You are a great question asker. I think, Sean McDermott tried to downplay it yesterday when he was asked about what playoff experience means. But I think one of the things that makes some of these teams that are so hard to beat in the playoffs, that accumulate wins, so difficult to beat, is that they're not overwhelmed in the big-time moments. And there's going to be big-time moments in this game. Unless somehow Jacksonville just runs the Bills out of their own house, I anticipate this being a game that's probably within a score, 10 points or so in the fourth quarter. And to me, give me Josh Allen. I mean, can you think about some of the performances in the playoffs in the fourth quarter that Josh Allen has had? Obviously, the first place you go is the 13 seconds game. But if you go back throughout his entire playoff run in the fourth quarter, for the most part, he's been electric. And to me, that's the thing. That's the biggest advantage you can have, is in the moments where you're asking yourself some questions if you're Jacksonville. Like, were you in the playoffs last year? I can't remember. I don't think they were in the playoffs last year. Like, this is something that you're in uncharted waters. As good as it's been this year, getting Indianapolis a couple of times with Phillip Rivers at quarterback in December. That's exciting stuff, but it's nothing like what's the setting's going to be when the entire NFL world is watching at 1 o'clock on Sunday, and that's when Josh Allen has shined the most. We'll see if we can do it again.
Do you remember when we had Hall of Fame head coach Bill Cowher on the show early in the year?
Yes.
Right? One of the things that he pointed out was when the playoffs arrive, it's an entirely different monster. It's way different. Things change. I like your point about the experience in the Bills coaching staff. And I would say that even a microcosm of that we've seen during the regular season. How good have the Bills been at making adjustments at halftime? And that's an experience thing. That's knowing your room. That's knowing your coaching staff. I think that coaching experience and the playoff experience is a big one. Ryan, what do you got?
It's playoff experience. Sean McDermott has 14 playoff games under his belt. Liam Cohen as a head coach, 0. Trevor Lawrence has had a few playoff games. Josh Allen has had 13. And then that's not even mentioning some of the guys on the defensive side of the ball that have played quite a few playoff games for Buffalo. It's a different beast this time of year. Buffalo's going to know what to expect. I think there could be some jitters on the side of Jacksonville coming out, being I know they're not the favorites in this game, but being the home team, having these high expectations. It's so much different in a playoff setting where if you go back and look at some of the early Josh Allen era in the playoffs and the nerves that were there, you don't really see that from these Bills teams now. They know how to go about their business. They know how to win these games, make the second half adjustments, do all the right things. So what Jacksonville does is going to be very telling based on their lack of experience.
I'm going to play devil's advocate really fast here. There's also something to be said about not knowing any better. And I think when you are a dog back against the corner and you don't understand the gravity of the moment, you play a little bit more free. I can think back to my playing days where everyone's telling you, oh, you're playing in this building, you're playing in that building. Cool as football. I get to run through your face. It doesn't matter about anything that the narratives and the guys are saying outside. I'm not saying experience doesn't matter, but there are some puppies out here who could care less about the moment.
We're going to take a quick break. BKL Makes Me Want to Shout. It's going to be right back. All right, welcome on back to the BKL Makes Me Want to Shout show. Bills, Jags coming up Sunday at 1 o'clock in the wild card round. The Bills, the number one goal of that last game against the Jets was just to not get anybody injured, and unfortunately, there were a couple of injuries that happened. Most notably is probably the cornerback, the rookie, Max Hairston. He goes down with an ankle injury. Sean McDermott has already said that he is unlikely to play coming up this weekend. That means all eyes are going to be on Tre'Davious White on the opposite side of Christian Benford. Just as notable, though, during his press conference, Matt, was he brought up that a couple of months ago they had an extra cornerback, and that would have been Jamarcus Ingram. And that's not the first time that he's kind of brought that up. Is he sending any sort of messages to general manager Brandon Beane that he just still is not very pleased about the way that all played out?
If he is, I think that would be very strange and kind of a departure from what they've been about for the entirety of their time together. I mean, if you rewind the clock a couple of years to Ty Dunn's tell-all story about Sean McDermott when, that bit came out about what he said in a team meeting about 9/11 and it took on a life its own. One of the first people to kind of have Sean's back was Brandon Beane. And I mean, they've really been in lockstep over the years. So I think I'd be really surprised if that's like his intention. But at the same time, like, I was kind of nibbling at this idea in the offseason when I asked both of them consistently. And I never thought that either of them really wanted to get into it. Are you guys aligned in your vision for what this team is going to be? On one hand, Brandon Beane and your staff, do you understand the kind of players and are on the same page with Sean McDermott to go out and draft so you get them on the field so they can make an impact immediately? It's work with Maxwell Hairston. It's work with Deion Walker. So whatever maybe they did this offseason to maybe recalibrate things a little bit, I think that's a pretty good thing. And, I think maybe Sean as a head coach probably doesn't care as much about the ramifications long-term salary cap wise and otherwise. He probably wanted Jacoby Myers, and the Bills were reportedly in on him. So when he says, yeah, it's looked a little bit different since Jacoby Myers landed there, a team that we now have to go on the road to play in the playoffs, I can understand the frustration there. I just don't think that he's necessarily sending messages. And I wonder if he unknowingly know or doesn't know that this maybe is going to spark a little bit more of a conversation there about simmering tensions going into the offseason with some of these comments.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a jab directly at Brandon Beane or anything like that, but it might be some frustration because we saw as soon as it was reported Darius Slay was not going to come to Buffalo, the frustration from Sean McDermott about losing Jamarcus Ingram because they love what he brought on special teams. He was depth at cornerback. He points out after this game, hey, I didn't have any other bodies really to run out there. We're a man short since that failed acquisition. So I think there's frustration there. I think that with the Bills being in the mix of things, he probably would have loved to move at the trade deadline. And Myers is someone he's been very complimentary of throughout Myers' career. I had a lot of respect for him in New England and throughout his time, an underrated player, saying all that stuff, where the Bills kind of, stood pat, and maybe it cost them the division, maybe not. They're still in the dance now, the playoffs, but I do think there's a little bit of frustration at the very least bubbling over from McDermott in terms of not being able to have a little bit more roster flexibility this weekend and losing Hairston and this wide receiver room not really showing the growth, and you having to go out and bring in Brandon Cooks and essentially emerge as one of your top guys 2 weeks ago. That's got to be frustrating based on the players that you had on this roster and all the talk that Brandon Beane had leading up to the season about, we like this room, we've got the guys here, the Bills are the number one offense, and I think we've gotten better. Well, they really haven't.
I think that McDermott's not messy, so I'm not going to sit up here and say that he's throwing haymakers at Beane through the media, but I do think there's been some small cracks in the foundation. Two reasons why. The day after the trade deadline, both Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott addressed the media, and they were both asked, do you believe this is a Super Bowl caliber roster? And McDermott danced around it and said yes in a roundabout way, and then Brandon Beane outright said yes. And I thought that was very telling that the guy who is in the trenches every single day kind of like danced around it a little bit. Obviously, he has faith in the 53 guys in that locker room, but I thought that was somewhat telling, while Brandon Beane was full-throated like, no, yes, I believe our guys are good enough. And then when I think about the Jacoby Myers thing, we've talked about this all the time. Sean doesn't really talk about opposing teams too often or in terms of going in depth. He did it a few weeks back with Myles Garrett, but that's different. Jacoby Myers, a player who's never been a Pro Bowler, All-Pro, barely had 1,000 yards. Giving him that type of endorsement, I think, says a lot about who he believes Jacoby is as a player, but also the fact that Jacoby Myers was available for the Buffalo Bills to get. So I'm not going to sit up here and say Sean McDermott is throwing haymakers, and crosses to Brandon Beane. But I do think there is some kernel of hey, bro, you see the same thing I'm seeing now. Like, come on, help me out a little bit here.
Not going to pretend that I'm in the room and that I see the workings behind the doors and behind the scenes and everything. But I can't tell you what's good, but I can tell you what's right. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think it's absolutely incorrect if that is what Sean's trying to do. I don't think it is, but if it is, that's wrong. He can't do that. You can't be the head coach and expect your players. I mean, look, Sean would frown big time on any of his players getting in front of a microphone talking about another player, right? Even if it was a subtle jab like we're talking about, he wouldn't appreciate that. I would like to think that that's not Sean's intention. I think it's a frustration that maybe sometimes leaks out. We see Sean so often very calculated in his messages. So I guess that's kind of where the tricky part of this conversation is, right? Sean's very calculated in what he says. So we're used to seeing that side of it. So when something kind of comes out and maybe it's a frustration that just kind of verbally just kind of shows itself, everybody goes, Oh, I didn't expect that. Not from a guy who's very, very calculated on everything that he says and wants out there. So I don't think that's his intention. I will also say this: I'm not in those closed meetings. I'm not behind the scenes, and I can understand why he'd be frustrated because look, you try to get Darius Slay, doesn't work out. Lose Jamarcus Ingram. For that, the Jacoby Myers points are all valid because, let's face it, he would look pretty good right now in a Bills jersey after we've talked all season long about their lack of weapons. We are going to take a quick break. A lot more of BKL Makes Me Want to Shout coming up after the break. All right, welcome on back to BKL Makes Me Want to Shout. Bills, Jags, Wildcard coming up. Every postseason, there's usually a team that's the scary team. And even though the Bills have never made that run to the Super Bowl, they always were kind of considered one of the scary teams. Has that worn off a little bit, Carl? Are they still a scary team?
Okay. I got a movie reference for you. You ready?
I'm ready.
The Bills are scary, but they're scary in the way that like Scary Movie 1, 2, and 3 are scary. Where like you watching one, and there's a couple scenes in there, you're like, whoa, jump a little bit. But like through the duration of the movie, you ain't really too frightened. I think about that 21 Bills team, that 23 Bills team. It was Conjuring. It was, those type of movies where the whole time I'm holding Aaliyah.
You're like this.
I'm a grown man holding
watching
on.
through a couple fingers like
You feel me? I'm holding on to my fiance like a little kid, like praying for my life that they're gonna jump out at me. In all seriousness, though, they are still a scary team for the sole purpose of 17. And I think when you have the best player in the dance, I know this isn't basketball. It's not as easy as saying, hey, you have LeBron James or Michael Jordan, you can guarantee a trip to the NBA Finals. But I do think in a playoff field that has a bunch of imperfect teams, and you can go down the list, 1 through 14, and that there's not one perfect dominant team in football, having the the trump card where you can just throw out there and say, hey, I got this bad boy. And I think that when 17 can provide those moments for the Buffalo Bills, I think still makes them scary because at the end of the day, you heard what Mike Vrabel said after the last time they played. What do you want me to do? They have him. He's 6'5", 240, and he can make all the plays, and he's not the only man on planet Earth who feels that way.
There's a GIF prevalently used of Josh Allen on X on the sideline where he just looks like he's in a different dimension entirely and screaming at his teammates. And if I'm the AFC field watching the Bills post-game locker room video that they put out the other day, when Josh Allen looked around the entire room and said it's effing go time to the entire room, I don't know, that scares me a little bit, knowing what this guy has done in the playoffs. I mean, this is literally, outside of Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback of this era when the games matter the most. And so I think you're excited about what you've built in a lot of these places, like Jacksonville, Denver, New England. I mean, these are legitimate Super Bowl contending teams now. But they haven't been here yet. They haven't been in the true proving grounds where Josh Allen has been. And I don't want to downplay what we saw from Brandon Cooks a couple weeks ago because I think we were waiting to see that from Amari Cooper for half a season last year. And Cooks did it in like 3 weeks. He figured out a way to make the kind of impact in a game that you needed. You got the run game, you got the quarterback, and now I think you have your wide receiver one who has this last chance at, I was thinking about this a couple days ago, and I'm going to probably write about it this week. Brandon Cooks has this last chance at glory. This is a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver that's been in a bunch of different places, has had kind of fits and starts in terms of how much success he's had. But it's been a while since he's been in a spot this good and a role this pronounced in an offense. He's wide receiver one right now in this offense. And going into this playoff run, I think that you can get excited about a lot of the things that you've seen and couple that with the fact that this Bills defense is playing the best it has all year the last couple of weeks. Although I will say, I just saw a clip online of Liam Cohen. It was on Rich Eisen, and he's already making note of the fact that the Jags are home underdogs. So we'll see how that storyline plays out this week.
Yeah, the Bills have the scariest player in the league in Josh Allen, and I'd argue the second scariest player in this matchup with James Cook. But as a team, I'm really torn on this. This is not the defense that we saw early on in the Sean McDermott era where you had Micah Hyde and prime Jordan Poyer early days of Trey White playing at a Pro Bowl / All-Pro level. There's a lot of holes on this team, but at the same time, there's also a lot of issues with every AFC team in this conference. And I saw someone in the Denver media say, if I'm a Broncos player or a coach, I'm giddy that Buffalo and Jacksonville are playing this weekend, because those are the two teams that pose the biggest threat to Denver making it to the Super Bowl. So I guess from a national narrative, this is still a scary team because they have Josh Allen. They have that experience, knowing full well what he's been able to do in his career. Yes, they're still a scary team, but there's also some glaring issues there.
The Bills are the attractive team that's in the pageant that's filled with some teams that are 6'7", if you will. I mean, they're just kind of. Carl's giving me that look. I knew I was about to get that look from everybody. They just aren't. Look, I think one of the things that makes them so scary is the fact that the rest of the playoff field isn't really scary. I mean, I know we talk a lot about, look, great defenses, across the board, whether it's Jacksonville or the Texans. You flip across, to the conferences. Seattle's defense is outstanding. You guys bring up the point, though. Josh Allen is what makes this team scary. He is the scariest player going into this postseason. Who's the X factor on Sunday, Matt?
The Ravens are firing John Harbaugh.
Wow.
That just came across my
The Ravens are firing John Harbaugh. Hey, okay, real quick then. Where does he land? Because I'm going to tell you right now, as Carl and I are both looking at each other because two guys who grew up in Northeast Ohio, and they just fired their head coach, Kevin Stefanski. Baltimore being the city that stole the team, John Harbaugh might look pretty good in Cleveland. Where do you think John Harbaugh ends up? Any guesses?
I think
Giants will be after him too.
Who would you say?
Giants.
That's a good one.
If I'm Harbaugh, I love the level of talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball in Atlanta. And I wouldn't mind going to the NFC. I know that it seems stacked right now, but I don't know, the long-term viability of a franchise run by Sam Darnold still has me feeling a little bit iffy year to year. We haven't seen him really take off in the playoffs yet. We saw what happened in Minnesota last year, and we'll see how he's able to make a run. Obviously, getting the number one seed is really impressive. I know the NFC was better this year, but I don't know. That Atlanta job to me is very attractive.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with Bijan, right? I mean, anytime you've got that kind of guy, and to your point, they got some guys on defense, where's Harbaugh end up?
CBS.
Fox. They pay.
Listen, if I'm him, I think I'll take a step back and remove myself from the scene. Pull a Mike Vrabel, go around the NFL, get some new ideas, some fresh ideas, because I think the marathon he's been on for 18 years now, I believe. Relax, my boy. Go talk to your kids. Talk to wifey. Relax. Have a matcha. And, get back into football.
A matcha.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, man. Some of these guys, when you think of the Harbaugh brothers,
oh, yeah, they crazy.
I mean, this is in their veins. Stepping away, I don't know that it sounds great in theory, but I don't know the Harbaugh brothers are built to do anything besides football. It also brings the point that Mike Tomlin's still got a job. I mean,
January 13th.
I mean, I know they're in the playoffs and they're still playing, so of course he's still.
Tomlin? Is it Mike Tomlin or Mike Myers? Because he can't be killed. He cannot be killed. Speaking of scary movies, Carl's got back in the back of his seat. No, Michael, don't get her.
And with that, we're going to take a break. Stick around. More BKL Makes Me Want to Shout coming up. Welcome back to BKL Makes Me Want to Shout. Coming off that breaking news segment there with John Harbaugh getting fired by the Baltimore Ravens. Now we settle back into talking about the Bills and Jags matchup, the Wildcard game coming up on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Who is the X factor, or what maybe is the X factor for Sunday?
That's a great question. And part of me wants to say Dalton Kincaid, because Jacksonville gives up the seventh most yards in the league to tight ends, around 65 yards per game. But I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go with it's got to be the Bills' offensive line. I know Jacksonville has not had a ton of success this year sacking the quarterback, but they've started experimenting a little bit as of late, putting Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker on the same side of the D line, and it's really paid off for them. I'm going to throw a stat at you: 18 dropbacks. The two of them have accounted for 10 pressures and 2 sacks. So you have 2 guys that can really get after the quarterback, and now they've kind of figured something out. You have a great Bills offensive line, Aaron Cromer, one of the best in the business. What are they going to draw up to keep the pressure off of Josh Allen, and also to create some running lanes against a team that hasn't given up much in terms of in the ground game? If this Bills O-line shows up and can dominate, that can be the X factor to the Bills winning this game.
For me, surprise, surprise, I am going defense. It has to be Christian Benford, or you can pick any outside cornerback or safety. But for me, I remember last year after they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, I went on Bills Kickoff Live and I said the Bills need their stars to shine bright when it matters most, because that's what's held them back in the postseason. When they play KC, it's always Chris Jones making the play, or Trent McDuffie, or Travis Kelce, or their offensive line playing stellar. When they lost to the Cincinnati Bengals, it's Jamar Chase, it's T. Higgins, it's those players balling out. And when I look at the Buffalo Bills, you have 2 stars on offense with being James Cook and Josh Allen. Who is your brightest star on defense? And you can say what you want about Joey Bosa. He's a great player. Greg Rousseau has turned it on of late. Their linebackers are playing a little bit better. But if we're going to go pound for pound defensively, Christian Benford is their best player defensively, and you need him to shine bright in a matchup where the Jaguars have been cooking with that good old fish grease over the last 8 games, whether it is Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, Britton Strange, that's the tight end spot. I need my CB1, who I paid $80 million to, or however many it was, to be that dude that we paid for in the wild card run against the Jags. Because if he's anything less than stellar, I don't know how they limit that passing game.
Josh Allen for me is the X factor, and it comes back to a question I asked them 3 weeks ago. And the Bills were coming off their second straight road victory, knocking off the Browns, who were a little bit more game than I think anybody thought they were going to be. The big performance on the road against the Patriots. And I asked him, what's been the difference? And he didn't have a long response for me. He kind of just looked at me and said, ball security. We can't beat ourselves. And to me, the guy that's really beat the Bills themselves the most this year has been 17. I mean, uncharacteristically turning the ball over, pre-snap, and then decision-making during the snap that's led to sacks, that's led to turnovers. Like, you got to get the ball out of your hands. You got to live to play another down. There is special that comes with Josh Allen. It is just part of the experience. But there has been way too much chaos. And I know he's Captain Chaos, but you don't always have to live that lifestyle. I mean, the Bills are probably going to have a plan for what Ryan's talking about. Deion Dawkins is probably going to need some help. Maybe Spencer Brown at times too, although Josh Hines-Allen mostly lines up against the left tackle. Josh Allen has to limit the turnovers, and this is against a team that always wins the turnover battle. And here's how good they are. Even in the 2 games that they lost the turnover battle in 2025, they still won those games.
My X factor is offensive coordinator Joe Brady, because there are times when this offense has looked really good, probably a little too far in between times. But when Joe Brady is humming and has got some things figured out, the offense looks fun and looks good and it's creative. But then there are times when it's just kind of spinning its wheels. And I think when I say Joe Brady, a big part of that is making sure the run game gets going. Because I get it. I know Jacksonville, #1 defense against the run. The Bills have played 6 games against the top 10 teams against the run. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'll read them to you real quick. Houston, James Cook had $116 and a touchdown. The Bucks, that was the only team that held them to under 100 yards rushing as a team. New England, 118 as a team, 141 as a team against KC. Baltimore, they ran for 3 touchdowns and over 100 as a team. 168 the second time they played New England and a couple of touchdowns. I think it's going to be key. The X factor to me is to be able to, Joe Brady has got to find a way to get creative in that run game and make that work. We are going to take a quick break. More to come on BKL Makes Me Want to Shout. Welcome on back to BKL Makes Me Want to Shout. We're going to put a bow on this bad boy. Switch gears a little bit outside of the matchup between the Bills and Jags, which we've just discussed for an hour now. What's your favorite storyline this year around the NFL, Matt?
You know, it's hard to like come up with a singular greatest story, but for me, I've really enjoyed what the LA Rams have done out there. Sean McVay reimagining a Super Bowl contender years after what they were able to do with like Von Miller and Cooper Kupp and all those greats, that Aaron Donald. The thing to me that's so special is, like, I was watching a video, I think it was this morning, of Matthew Stafford. Do you remember that one game? Calvin Johnson was still on the team, and he gets absolutely plowed into the ground on a hit. And I think he either his shoulder comes out of the socket or some crazy injury. He comes out for a play. They're at the goal line. It's a win it or lose it kind of play. And he basically tells everybody to get off him, and he's going back into the game. I've always been a Matthew Stafford guy, like going back to, Thanksgiving every single year, watching this guy just leave it out all on the field. And for him to have an MVP caliber season at his age, what he's done, and maybe Puka Nacua and Matthew Stafford led me to a dynasty championship this season.
Now we get to the point.
Confirm or deny, but it's been a heck of a story.
Yeah, I love that. For me, it's the parity of the league this year. You look at the last 20 plus years, and it was the Patriots dynasty, the Chiefs dynasty, and getting sick of seeing the same teams over and over again. Who had the Sam Darnold-led Seahawks as the number 1 seed in the NFC? Who had the Chargers and the Broncos getting into the playoffs out of the AFC West and the Chiefs missing it? Even the Patriots winning the division. There's been so much turnover and parity this year that, to me, this has been the biggest storyline and the best storyline, because it really does feel like this is a wide open year in the NFL in terms of who's going to win it all.
It's exciting for me that defense is back. Broncos, Texans, Seahawks, Eagles, Chargers, all those teams are fueled by their defense. Super exciting for me as a guy who likes to see people put people in the dirt.
Perino is in my phone now. Somehow he hacked my phone. Matt Stafford's the best storyline in the NFL. Dude's almost 38 years old. He threw 46 touchdowns and 4,700 yards. To Matt's point, he is as tough as your grandpa's toenail. I mean, he is just a bad dude. Matt Stafford's the guy. Thanks for watching. BKL makes me want to shout.